his ravenous hatred, he found no peace, and with boiling blood, he scoured the umbral plains, seeking vengeance against the Dark Lords who had wronged him. And those that tasted the bite of his sword named him the Doomslayer.
All right, let's see here if we can get going with this stuff. So I've said previously that let's see here. we are going to be doing some HTTP client stuff. Hang on. So, HTTP client stuff, meaning abstracting away some of the things that have to do with, well, doing GET requests, etc., etc. One of the purposes of doing this is so that we can move closer to implementing WebSocket stuff. You can see here that we are, hang on, let me make this a little bit larger, because you kind of never know. There you go. Is the text visible? Do we feel like it's legible? I mean, I'm assuming it is, but you know. Oh, I have the text here. Hang on. There you go. Now we're rid of this. Yeah, okay. So, can we read the text here? Actually, I kind of feel like this is one step a little bit too far. Hang on. Let me synchronize on this. Yeah, this is the correct original size. 1, 2, 3. There you go. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and assume for now that stuff is legible, and we're gonna sort of move forward with this. Let's see here what we can do with this. We are connecting to something. So I've set up a basic, this is of course a little bit large for now, hang on. Let's see here. Here is a WebSocket server in Go, in fact, that we can connect to so that we can use the client with something. There are other WebSocket servers, but I want to try out certain behaviors here, so we can't just set up one that sort of echoes something back. Ordinarily, I would just use a program called the WebSocket for this. WebSocket is in some sense like Netcat, if you know this program. So we can say, for example, WebSocket -s, and then we can say, you know, the port that we want to listen on. So this could be 4201. And so on. And now we're listening on that for WebSocket connections and so on. Once someone connects, we can just start typing stuff. The reason that I don't want to use that one is primarily because I want to send certain frames and so on. The WebSocket specification, if we can find this. Yeah, here we have this. Has the concept of frames. So you have different types of frames and so on. And data is transmitted using a sequence of frames to avoid confusing network intermediaries such as in blah, blah, blah. Sure, we can skip a little bit here. Basically, you can see here that there's a certain structure to a frame, and that we have different types of frames. So that is kind of what I want to actually look at in the long run. But for now, we might just sort of take a little bit of a step back from that and say that we might just want to try this out with some web server stuff in general and see that it works correctly. So let's kind of, so we have this GET request here, we have headers here, and of course upgrade, WebSocket, and so on. This is not necessarily something we need. We could just say this, for example, and actually connect to anywhere. So let's try that. The key is of course only used in the case where we have a WebSocket. Here we can also comment this out. And so here we could go, for example, google.com, for example, right? What happens when we do this? Port required. Okay, that's interesting. We might fix that. So here we can see we're getting a redirect when we connect to google.com, right? Presumably that's actually because yeah, we're not getting any headers on that one. That's an interesting thing. This I actually want to examine a little bit. So let's try to instrument this a little bit, because I'm sure that we actually have headers. Well, I'm not sure, but I suspect we have headers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, yeah, let's see here, log debug f received. Just going to do this for now. This is going to be a whole lot of stuff, so we might just say new line here and then put some extra quotes around stuff and so on. Maybe some new lines potentially and so on. And here we want to do this. Right, we do indeed have headers. So the location we've been redirected to is obviously with www, right? Now, why are we not getting headers here? That is an interesting question, right? It sounds like something is wrong, right, with this, clearly. We can close that. So we're getting that data. It's clearly in the receive buffer, right? And parse response here is definitely not doing exactly what it needs to, right? So presumably when we reach this parse headers here, something is in fact wrong here. But it's not wrong enough for it to not get the headers. That's an interesting thing as well, right? So if we go to parse headers, we might actually try to just say, hey, what data do you actually have? Let's just say yes. And here I usually do put quotes because I often get fooled by white space in these types of situations. Let's see here. Hang on. Is anyone seeing data? Data equals here. Right, so we do indeed have, oh, but we have a leading new line. Hang on. Right, so we have a leading new line that probably is messing stuff up here. Right, so we create this tokenizer here. Then we peek at the token and we try to read a string until, hello, Mindale? How's everyone doing today? Actually, I can remove this. I was listening to the song before, obviously. So I needed the headphones, but I don't need them now. So obviously here, we could actually say skip any of here, and that might actually solve this, right? So because we have this leading new line here, I'm wondering, yeah, let's try that, right? So we are going to, when we create the tokenizer, we are going to then say tokenization, tokenizer, skip any of, tokenization, sure, spaces, sounds good. Tokenization, new line. Now we also have to make sure that we are skipping CRLF as well. Oh, well, yeah, this is the nature of getting reminded, oh shit, I love this game, and then yeah, nothing gets done. Indeed, yeah, this is dangerous. Dangerous territory indeed. Luckily, I don't think I can play Doom Eternal very well, if I'm being completely honest. So now we are getting obviously the rest of the response, right? We can see here that the headers we have, our response is now filled with headers, right? So clearly skipping this new line that we have up here, right over here, that new line was messing stuff up. We were not getting the correct thing. Obviously, you could actually put the skipping of stuff elsewhere, right? So if we look at message here, this is the status line, right? And you can see here that we are reading until we reach a CRLF, right? And obviously you could argue here that really this part should skip, right? So that's probably more correct, right? The important thing is we found the actual problem, so to speak, right? And we can also use skip string, by the way, to skip a specific string. And this actually should also possibly return an error, because if we haven't found that string, this should be an error, right? So it both asserts that we find the string and also skips it, which is useful. But yeah, Doom Eternal, I've literally never played it, and I was gonna say that I'm not entirely sure that I could play it very well on my computer, to be honest. I've never tried it, you know, so I wouldn't know really. But I've played 2016 a fair amount. I think 2016, I feel like 2016 was the game that sort of told me that id is back, right? Finally, right? I mean, I wish it was under even better circumstances. You know, I wish that they had a certain person at the company making everything, but you know, we can't have everything at the end of the day, right? He probably doesn't want to do that either, to be fair. Anyway, we can see here that we are indeed getting the headers. What we're not getting though is the body, which is a massive mistake, of course. We have to add the parsing of the body, otherwise this makes no sense, right? So clearly there's a part missing after this for here, because this for is for reading headers, right? So we can take a brief look at what that actually means, right? Here we... Right, if we find a new line, we're done looking for headers. Otherwise, we read a string until we find a colon, right? And then we expect a colon. We skip any of spaces and tabs. And there is actually a quirk in the spec of HTTP that basically, if you read a new line in the middle of everything, the header is not done yet. If you have indentation after it, actually you will concatenate the next value to the header value if you have indentation. So if we find spaces or tabs, this actually means that we should concatenate values instead. And so on. It's just a small detail in the spec. I don't think anyone really uses this. It would seem pointless to me, but who knows really. To be honest, a lot of old protocols are kind of shit, right? I don't know if people kind of know this. They're underspecified, generally speaking. They are textual, which is complete garbage in general. Text protocols are generally not just, it's just not a good idea, in my opinion. And they're all underspecified. You can do all kinds of stuff if you want to. There are way too many ways of doing stuff, generally speaking, right? And it's, yeah, I don't know, they're a mess really. But the thing about the old protocols was that, generally speaking though, and I'm trying here to play devil's advocate a little bit, right? They did make some of these protocols some of these ways because it allowed everyone to kind of build more easily, right? Having underspecified protocols that allowed you to do way too many things in too many ways and so on allowed everyone to kind of build stuff, right? Nowadays, we don't really, honestly, what people come up with nowadays, people are usually smarter about it. So they will come up with things that are strictly specified. If you put garbage in, it will tell you, this is garbage, stop doing that. Another great example of this, of course, is HTML, right? Oh, you're missing a closing tag. Who knows what's going to happen? You know, that's fine that you're missing a closing tag, or there are 50 million ways to do this wrong, and nothing is going to ever tell you, right? Nothing is strict about anything. It's just, oh yeah, we'll see what happens, you know. Actually complete garbage. But yeah, a lot of these old protocols and old ideas are just, yeah, awkward to say the least. So when we've read new lines and so on after these headers, we actually want to read the body. So that would be until the rest or the end of everything, right? And here we actually want to, what do we have here? This is parse headers. We actually don't want to do this here at all. We actually want to do this here, body. We want to say just, honestly, we should be able to just say, yeah, basically this. Let's try this and see what happens, yeah? Request has no field body. This is the wrong place. Parse response, thank you very much. They have approximately the same structure. Body token, oh, thank you very much. Let's see here. This is a string. Now the question here is if we want to have it be a string, we're gonna go ahead and just say this is a string for now. I don't really mind this assumption here. Certainly that is kind of how it looks a lot of the time. It's certainly a textual representation of something. And here we definitely see that our headers make sense. And where does the body start? I should just pretty print this. Why isn't anyone telling me, huh? Response. Okay, there you go. This is not what we want though. No, because we're getting headers here. That's not what we want at all. Let's see here if we can go to parsing, parse response. We're obviously not stepping forward here, right? So when we've skipped all of these things, the tokenizer position should, right, this creates a separate tokenizer, the parse headers one. That might be pointless, but I don't really want to give it a tokenizer either. So by the way, what I'm talking about here is, of course, you can see up here we create the tokenizer, right? This is really just a fairly simple structure with some state, right? So that tokenizer is then being used here, and we are modifying the position and so on, the index that we're currently looking at and so on. It's really just a glorified reader in some ways, right? A reader with certain, you can pass it certain, you can expect things from it and so on, and it will give errors based on this. And what we're doing here is we are now passing a string to this parse headers structure, right? And so with that, we're basically creating a new tokenizer completely separate from the other one. So we're never modifying the one that we're currently using, which means tokenizer position is never modified by parse headers, right? So we would have to have some kind of way to say, this is how many bytes have been processed or something like this, right? Maybe parse headers could actually return this, right? That could be a reasonable thing. We could have, for example, bytes processed here. And so yeah, let's see if we can. We could then say tokenizer dot position, right? Because that is how many position, like how much we've stepped forward, basically. Probably. Let's see. And here we can just say 0 value. It's not super important necessarily. That is a debate. Here you could say tokenizer position for all of these. That would be valid as well, right? How many, and you might question like, okay, so is it valuable to have how many bytes we processed in the case of the error cases as well? This is entirely up to you, right? What you're expecting from things in the end, to be honest. Bytes. Let's call it header bytes here. And here what we could do is basically say plus header bytes here. Let's see if we can do this. Undeclared name, that is of course because you can see that there's an equals there. Let's just say header bytes. It's not super duper important. And here, what do we have here? Oh, here we don't have a tokenizer, right? So we processed 0 bytes at this point, for sure. Tell me, by the way, if something doesn't make sense and so on, because, you know. So now, the only thing we're actually getting here, the only thing that's wrong is obviously that we're getting this CRLF here, right? So I am not accounting for that, apparently. And that is because we are never skipping over here. You can see here, read string until, right? If we find that, what we actually want to do here is also tokenizer skip string, right? And now we've skipped the thing that we know we found because we were reading a string until we found this value, right? And if we can't find this value, something is wrong. So here we can do an or return. Reason I'm doing or return everywhere is obviously because this tokenizer has this expectation error that it returns, and most of this is very strict parsing. So we basically just want to parse those things for sure. Otherwise we should get some kind of error. And so here, this is parse headers. Header parsing error can return a few things, but it importantly never returns a tokenizer error. Let's see here if we can. Expectation error here. Oh yeah, okay, so in this one I'm actually translating the errors, and that's fine. Yeah, okay, let's continue doing that because let's see here, skip error. Is this if skip error It's not nil. Here we could actually try to bake this in here, right? And we could copy this. If either of these are wrong, clearly something is going on, right? So let's bake that in there. Let's see, are we actually skipping this now? Error when getting stuff. Expected header name end. Okay, clearly I've bungled something here. This, oh right. Of course I can't put that out there. What am I thinking? What am I thinking? We want that check though. So we are going to, yeah, return nil tokenizer position for sure, but then expected header end marker is what we're gonna say. And sure, we can do this. That seems reasonable to me. We're gonna create a new error for this. Let's see where we have these. Expector header name end, header value end. These are reasonable. Here I did copy that, so we can just sort of do this. Struct data string like this, yeah. And now we of course have to say that parse response error can be one of these, right? And presumably this would be a header parsing error actually. So we would put that there. There you go. Now we have a nice error just sitting there for us. It's good stuff. And yeah, okay. I think this is fine for now. We're parsing the response. Let's see if this actually works. I mean, that would be obviously the goal. I'm not getting, oh, guys, what is happening? Parsing parser parse headers. We are saying here, if I find a new line, sure. Hang on. This is in parse headers, sure. Read until error. Oh, this is the value string. Hang on. I have inserted this probably in the wrong place. Let me look at this a little bit. End marker here. Now that's the end marker for the value. And then we are going to, or the key rather. Hang on, am I never, oh no, I'm reading the colon there. And then we have skipping spaces and tabs. Tokenizer read string until, read until CRLF. Then we skip that string. Where are we setting done? Oh, right, done reading header value here. So yeah, here we actually want to skip, right? Because the headers have to end with this. Let's try it. Theorizing isn't getting us in any better shape. Error when getting expected header end marker. Sure. Okay, so we're triggering this error now, clearly. That is because this is skipped here, I suppose. Is it possible that the body is actually starting with this? I don't think so. Right, this shouldn't be the case. Should I be putting this out here? Right, hang on, let's look at this. Yeah, we're done with all of the headers here. That was happening over and over. Let's try this here. Sure, okay. Now it's fine. We obviously we want to be trimming this at the end though. Because if you see here, right? This is a small issue, of course. I'm not going to bother too much here with this. Right, so that's normal, just GET requests to pages, right? And this is what we build the WebSockets on top of, right? So if we uncomment this, here I actually want to, we're gonna put this in a interface function. I probably have the server running still. I do. Let's see. Right, so here we're getting the response here from the web server on the other side that says basically, yeah, we're switching protocols. And the headers here, you can see here that it responds with upgrade WebSocket. It accepts. And for those who might be wondering, what is all that stuff about? Let's see here if I can find this. It is actually these things. So when you make a your opening handshake, you're basically, WebSockets are really just, we make a GET request. It has to have certain headers inside of it. One example of this would be this here. The actual required headers are the sec WebSocket version, which has to be 13. The protocol is not actually required. This is really more for, you know, if you know that the other side might know something extra, right? You can specify a protocol there to inform it that, hey, we're speaking, by the way, Phoenix kind of WebSockets, right? For example. Specify an origin if you come from a browser. You actually don't need to. Then we have a key here, and this is an interesting thing because this is 16 bytes of basically you have to invent one key for each request, right? You can't actually just have a standard one. Then you base 64 encode this and you send it. And what the other side actually does, if we look at this diagram here, is then basically they take the actual key value, right? They take it as it is, importantly, and they concatenate this together with this GUID here, right? And then SHA-1 hash it, and base 64 encodes that hash. So if we have this, we send this, for example, right? This is a base 64 encoded value, right? They concatenate it together with this GUID, just as it is, right? Like this. Turn that into hex values, obviously. It's just a bunch of data, right? Just a bunch of bytes. This is a SHA-1, right? And then they base 64 that SHA-1 and send it back. That's in the accept. So we can see how that actually works out here. Right, this is the other web server, the Golang web server, by the way. Basically telling us, oh, this is, you know, what we're getting back. By the way, we're missing something here. Connection should be something else. Oh, or is that because it's because I'm switching back and forth, probably between the terminals. Yeah. This was cut off because I have different size screens. So if I switch this now to a different window, it will resize the screen and cut off a bunch of stuff. Anyway, not important, but so that no one's confused, like, hey, this header is not being parsed. It was. So this is the entire, now for this connection attempt, WebSocket accept value, right? So that's what that process actually means. And we expect this kind of switching protocols message, like 101 is the status code. So if you look at this here, we have 101 switching protocols is the message, right? And that, yeah, this is all what we expect. Now, basically the next steps would be bake this into a function that basically says connect WebSocket or WebSocket connect, whatever it might be, right? So we might make a separate package entirely for this that uses the HTTP machinery. And with this, we would then, let's see here if I can get the chat up again so I don't miss anything. Obviously I wasn't missing anything, but so the idea now is basically we say, okay, we bake this connection step into initialize WebSocket, connect WebSocket, whatever it might be, right? And then the idea would be effectively, okay, allow then the user of the WebSocket to obviously send stuff on it, right? And that's where kind of this frame format has to come into play, right? Full disclosure, I have not looked 100% deeply into this. It certainly looks a lot worse than I would like it to, right? Because this looks like a lot, if we're being completely honest. It's probably not that much, to be honest, right? One key thing to understand is that there's effectively a byte that says what type of message is this, right? So if we actually look at the Golang source, we can in some ways see this even. So here, if we look at the Golang stuff, we can actually see here that there are these bytes that are associated with different types of frames, right? So this is obviously a part of what is happening, right? The way we use this in Go is, well, highly irregular, I would say, if we look at it from a data perspective. We have these frame writers that we can use. And the idea here behind the Go code is really to just have a protocol that we can implement in some ways. So when a client connects, we are going to be sending a ping to them, right? This is the Golang side, right? We connect to this server. It sends a ping to us with a number, a random number, right? We have to respond with a pong with the correct number. That's the idea. Once we implement this protocol, we know that we can send messages, basically. The idea is obviously to add more to this, right? We're gonna send text frames, binary frames, ping frames and pong frames, and so on. I don't remember if there are any, I don't remember all of the frame types, but we're gonna be covering all of them in due time, right? The question here is really, how long is this gonna take? This opcode, I'm assuming, is that value, right? You saw in the Golang source, this is not a lot of bits, right? Unknown frame, okay, so this is 1 byte, right? That can't be this 4-bit value, but it could be Golang is just using this as a, let's say, garbage value, right? They're using this here to say, oh, if we read some other bit pattern, that's nonsense, right? Or something, right? We don't necessarily need to be super concerned that, oh, this requires a byte. It could just be that Golang is doing this, right? That way. So clearly here, right, we can see that 3 to 7. Yeah, this matches, right? So this is definitely how this actually works. So the opcode is situated in this segment here, bits 4 to and including 7. And here are basically different bits for, yeah, we need to read a little bit here, it seems, right? Obviously I could have read read up on this before, but that would not be, I was gonna say that would not be, you know, live streaming. Of course, it would have been completely fine for me to read this before. But so fin obviously is some final fragment in a message. First fragment may also be the final fragment. Okay, so we can have one, obviously. Right, so if this bit is set, that means we are done with a message. Okay, that's good to know. RSV1, 1 bit each, and so on, must be 0 unless an extension is negotiated that defines meanings. Oh, hang on. Oh, that makes things very easy. Fuck all of these. Right? That makes things super easy. We're concerned with fin. That's it. The final flag, right? This is all it. The other ones, we're not gonna have any extensions right now. They can go do something. So yeah, we're just gonna read a byte. We're gonna take the 4 first bits of that. Actually discard 3 of those basically. We're not gonna concern ourselves with those, and really only care about this fin here, and that's fine, right? We're good on that front. And then we have this mask here, which is interesting. So we have opcode. We kind of figured out opcode, so it's fine. Now I'm a little bit curious about their notation here. %x0. I mean, okay. Yeah, mask 1 bit defines whether the payload data is masked. What does that mean? If set to 1. A masking key is present in the masking key. Okay. This is used to unmask the payload data. All frames sent from client to server have this bit set to 1 from client to server. Okay. Then we have length, no mystery here, though they do the same thing as LC4 frames. If anyone was here for some of that, we read 7 bits, right? And then if that bit pattern is the maximum, we know we need to read more. And this is a usual kind of way of doing it, I suppose, right? So if we read 7 bits, right? We check those bits. If that value is 126, we know that we need to read 16 bits more, right? But here though, it's interesting here. Okay, so they don't have exactly the same scheme, because surely you would just read like 1 more byte here. Otherwise, okay, they're obviously a little bit, I think they've overcomplicated some of this, to be honest. If 126, the following 2 bytes are interpreted as a 16-bit unsigned integer are the payload length. Why wouldn't you just add? Right, so if we have the value 0 to 125, that is the payload length. Sure, okay. Everything is normal so far, right? If the value is 126, the following 2 bytes are interpreted, presumably. The following 2 bytes interpreted as a 16-bit unsigned integer are the payload length. So they're not even saying add the first 126. This seems like just a waste. Can anyone get some people on the phone? the people who suggested this. Am I crazy, or does this just seem like waste? Is everyone following what I'm saying? Surely you would use the fact that you've already read 126, the value, and add that to the following 2 bytes. No? You're just wasting these 7 bits otherwise. Am I crazy? I mean, maybe I am. It has nothing to do with this perhaps, but because you've read 7 bits, it's a number, right? Surely you would then say, oh, add that to whatever the following 2 bytes say. Now you just have more bits to play with. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. I desperately need someone to rubber duck this, I feel. Like the reasoning. What could the reasoning be? Because this text makes it seem like you read 7 bits. And if that bit value is 126, you would then say, oh, just read 2 bytes, and that's the length. But surely we would say, oh, 7 bits value plus 2 bytes. Right? But because it's like, this is how LZ4 does it, and that makes perfect sense to me, right? If we read a 15 in the length, we would then, yeah, well, I mean, we have 7 bits from the beginning, right? And certainly some frames will fit into this length, right? So we've only paid 7 bits for many frames, if they're small, right? But if we have 126, we read 2 bytes more, and now we get 2 bytes plus 7 bits, is my reasoning, if we just use both values, right? But with the way they're writing it, it seems we're just using 2 bytes if we have the value 126, which is just like, I don't know, that makes no sense. Because we could have said, oh, the spec could have been basically read 7 bits. If it's 126, read 1 byte more and add it to the 126 you had. That gives us almost the same efficiency. That's almost 2 bytes, right? But it seems to me they're throwing away 7 bits for no reason. I'm probably wrong. Maybe the spec is just, you know, they wrote it, or the RFC just, they wrote it and then they were like, is this verbiage, does this make sense? Sure, whatever, man. No one reads these. Let's go. Or something, I don't know. If it's 127, the following 8 bytes interpreted as a 64-bit unsigned integer are the payload length. Again, we're throwing away these 7 bits, I think. Oh, hang on. Oh, okay, I could have read more. I suspect that what they're saying, still very unclearly, mind you, the payload length is the length of the extension data. The extension data plus the length of the application data. I don't know what either of those actually are, because I don't feel like we've talked about extension data and application data here necessarily. But maybe they're saying that those 7 bits are actually, maybe that's what they're saying, right? They're not saying application data here. Here they're saying extended payload length. I feel like 50 different people wrote this and they did not coordinate with each other. We're gonna find out it's actually 3 people, but you know, anyway, such is like, we can do whatever. We're obviously gonna see in practice what actually happens here, right? Here we have the famous masking key that we saw before. All frames sent from the client to the server are masked by a 32-bit value that is contained within the frame. This field is present if the mask bit, yeah, sure, and absent if the mask bit is set to. See this other section on what fuck masking actually is supposed to mean in this context, okay. The masking key is contained completely within the frame. We've covered this, please. It is used to mask the payload data. Yes, I know, but what does that mean? The masking key is a 32-bit. Yes, I know. What's that mean? Chosen at random by the client. When preparing a masked frame, the client must pick a fresh masking key. Are you telling me this is just a random value and that's it? Because what I'm getting now is it's a random value. They are going to great lengths to explain to us, of course, it needs to be a good random value. It can't just be a little bit random, which is fair enough, right? We'll use something that seems more random, better random, right? Fair enough, right? So as a client, we're always going to send this. We're always going to set the frame masked to 1, and that's fine. Let's move on from that for the moment. The payload data, x plus y bytes. The payload data is defined as extension data concatenated with application data. Extension data, x bytes, is 0 bytes unless an extension has been... Okay, they weren't telling us that it made sense before, because now they're explaining what the extension data is, and it's not that. These people are crazy. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, just to be. Maybe this is a spicy take, but this is dumb. This is dumb, I think. Unless they're just assuming that, yeah, of course you're adding them. You're adding the 7-bit value to whatever you find in the 16-bit value. You're adding the 7-bit value to whatever you have in the 64-bit value. But if you did this, why on earth would you not just say, read 7 bits. If it's the max value, read 1 more byte and add it to your 7 bits. This just seems pointlessly specific, but also not good, to be honest. I don't know. I think maybe they got some old RFC people on implementing this. They were like, yeah, you made so many RFCs back in the day. Little did they know they were complete shit and written badly, bad ideas, and so on. Arbitrary application data taking up the remainder of the frame after any extension data. Sure. Okay, let's start kind of working on this, right? Mask is here. Right, so we're being sent a ping. So really, the test here should be fairly simple. The code that we put together here should be reasonably simple. We're just going to receive here. Actually, we're just going to receive once, and we're going to see sort of what is being sent, right? We can inspect this value and sort of just move on from there, right? Let me just create the receive buffer here. And here, does it say how big these things are? Like this bit here should be a certain length, probably. It doesn't matter. Let's just say, sure, like this. Hello, Pavel. Thank you for promoting Odin. Well, I'm doing it because I too like Odin a lot. And also, I mean, in some ways, like it's a selfish thing also, right? I want to work with Odin, right? I want my company, the company that I run, right, to be able to use Odin without there being questions, basically. You don't get there by just having a language that's good in the end, right? I have tried Zig, yeah. I wrote Zig for about, well, I guess it was two years and a little bit, right? So I wrote Zig from 2019 to 2022-ish, basically. And then I sort of, it fell off a little bit. I kind of came back to a little bit of the lower level stuff again, and got really into Odin because, I don't know, it just started making sense a lot more. Because I knew of Odin before that. But I guess it's kind of like the thing I mentioned in the video today. The first time I tried dlang, it felt weird because it wasn't expression based. And Odin had that kind of way about it that this does not care about expressions, right? And so on. And for a very long time, I've been using expression based languages. I've worked in Haskell, Elixir, Erlang, and so on. And before that, I was very into Racket, which is a Lisp, which is a little bit more expression based, obviously, as well. And yeah, it didn't really feel like something that, gelled with me necessarily. And then that wore off. I care a lot more about the stuff that I do get from Odin than those things, right? And I would say procedural code kind of just always kind of it has always made sense to me, but I was kind of used to maybe more expression-based languages at some point. Yeah, I do. Well, there are certain key things in Odin that I do think are better choices. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously the error handling, but I've harped on this so much that at this point, it's getting old. Even saying error handling is better in Odin. Yeah, everyone knows. I feel like this at this point. But yeah, also some of the things that Odin is comfortable just making implicit just kind of makes sense to me, right? Zero value initialization is. I thought that this was going to be bad. Full disclosure, when I started using Odin, I thought zero value initialization was like, why would you want this? There are so many scenarios that now become a little bit more complicated, blah, blah, blah. But then I used Odin because I wanted to give it a shot, right? I saw the overview page and I was like, a lot of these ideas make so much sense, right? And then I used it and it did just make sense, right? The zero value initialization in particular makes a lot of code just less, I know I don't want to talk about this right now, right? I don't want to set this value right now, but I have to, right? In Zig, for example. In Odin, it's just like, yeah, we're not going to set that value. It's going to be 0. It's fine, right? And so on. And yeah, it really turned into the opposite of what I thought Odin was going to be. But yeah, I like, first of all, I like trying languages. I like to say I've used the majority of languages at this point, right? So I decided just to give Odin a try, and then yeah, that was it basically. To be honest, it felt good after about like 20 minutes of writing it, to be honest. Obviously I was starting out, just re-implementing stuff, feeling out stuff that I was like, okay, how do you actually do this, and all of these things. But yeah, like I said, my interest in informing people about Odin is in some ways selfish, right? I want Odin to be bigger, and not necessarily because I don't care necessarily about the community or whatever. Most communities are, they devolve into complete garbage anyway. It's mostly having your own sub communities where you actually make, you make friends with people, you're like-minded, and these things. These are the real, this is the real value, right? This I'm interested in, right? But I'm not interested in having, this kind of community where people are like, oh, he's on the core team of this library or whatever. And I found that Elixir is a great example of this, where the community is, I don't know, there's this toxic niceness sometimes. I don't know how to explain it. And people they're so culty about everything. They have the same opinions. Everyone has literally the same opinion as everyone else. And it includes stuff that they have no business even talking about. They have opinions about languages they've never used, and so on. And it's all so self-congratulatory. Like, oh, we're so great here. We're using this great language and blah, blah, blah. And you just get a sense like, I don't know. Can we stop talking about how great Elixir is and just do stuff? Kind of. And this is something where I feel like Odin is already winning in many ways. People are doing stuff all the time, right? They're making their games, they're making, these cool things and so on to much higher degrees, to be honest. And people are not so focused on like, but we have this cool language and it's so much better than everything else necessarily, right? We all, of course, think this. I mean, on some level, right? Of course, I think that Odin is the best, because otherwise, why would I be using it for this purpose, right? Yeah, well, I feel similarly about Rust, the thing I said about error handling in Zig and so on. At this point, I feel like I've said it so much that there's no one who has seen videos by me who doesn't know what I think of Rust, I guess. Yeah, I'm not a fan, to be honest. It's very... I mean, I've used Haskell professionally, but I feel like Rust is similarly a dead end because it's just complicated. Like, it's complicated, and I think it's going to turn into a new C++, basically. And we're going to wonder, like, why would we ever think that this was not going to be C++? But yeah. Oof. I have to stop talking about this because I feel like at some point I'm just going to get a comment that tells me to kill myself or something. Because, you have too many opinions and so on. So let's see here. This is going to log what we receive. We don't have a socket at the moment. And, well, why don't we have a socket at the moment? Right. We don't have a socket at the moment because everything is done inside of get. Right. We have to escape this socket somehow. I'm gonna do this, don't roast me here, but I'm gonna export this socket, in fact. We're gonna return it here. I've been wanting to try out Elixir, so that's a shame to hear. Well, Elixir is a fantastic language. The community is not... I wouldn't say that you should join the community. Never join any communities, to be honest. Right? I don't know. I'm very biased, to be honest. I mean, I'm biased in the sense that I've had this opinion about communities for a very long time. I just don't like when communities grow too much in that respect and so on. I just think that they're not useful in the same way that people think they are. I think when people talk about the Rust community and so on, I don't know what the fuck they're talking about, because it just isn't... Yeah, I guess I don't get it. Right? I'm just gonna say that. I don't get it in the end. Yeah, Elixir, like I said, Elixir is a fantastic language. The Erlang virtual machine is a fantastic VM. And I definitely would recommend learning these. I've built my career on Elixir and Erlang, right? For backend services. And this is great technology, to be honest. If you have lots of users and you want something to happen roughly at the same time for all of them, these are great technologies, absolutely. For me, language mostly simple like C, Zig or Odin, and curated for features that can complicate it. Features that can complicate it. This means we need someone like Andrew Kelly saying, Is Hall his last name? I never knew. I have literally never learned his last name to be. This is the first time I'm hearing Ginger Bill's last name. To me, he's just Ginger Bill. I mean, I didn't know it was Hall. But yes, I do agree. Yeah, you actually need someone to design the language and keep it on track. I've seen so many feature requests in Zig when I was using it that it got a slight bit depressing, I would say. Because you realize everyone wants to make Zig into their own language with their own favorite features and so on. And it is just, it gets a bit much, is what I would say. Because I feel like people don't get it when I see stuff like this. And it's possible that I don't get it. I don't know. Maybe that is the case, right? I'm not sure. But yeah, I do feel like people are very quick to just say, hey, I need this and this and this and this, and they don't consider necessarily why would we want all of these things. Do you not think that maybe that will complicate the language a little bit, right? And add stuff that maybe isn't really Zig at this point, right? But I don't think that people necessarily think like this. And yeah. But again, it could be just me. Maybe I'm the one not getting it. And that is entirely possible. Because, you know, who am I to be like, oh, I know the absolute will of Andrew Kelly. Obviously I don't. That would be foolish, right? Let's see here, 4200. Yeah, okay, like this. This is 4200/WS. Yeah, feature creep, yeah. Kitchen sink. Yeah, basically there are certain languages I like them, I like to call them, you know, hang on, what is the term I actually use? I mean, kitchen sink languages, that is something I've said before about Nim, for example. Nim is a great example of this. D is a kitchen sink language. C++, obviously. But yeah, galactic level languages, right? They've grown so large that at some point it's just, you know, there's so much that, you know, it's just too big. They've added everything because everything seems so cool all the time, right? This is definitely a thing. What is this socket? Oh yeah, we're never receiving anything. That's curious though, right? We're printing here, and then we're never actually receiving anything at all. Doesn't this suggest maybe that our WebSocket server really just doesn't do anything? I'm confused about this. We may have to debug some Golang code here. Not super happy with that, to be completely honest. Hang on, what am I doing here? Right, so we're creating this actually from our WebSocket connection, which I thought was correct, but maybe I'm wrong. C became popular because it doesn't have almost any features. This didn't change for many decades. Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, there are just a few things that I think C should have, and that's it, right? Obviously, I think slices are a good idea. An actual string type, it's a good idea. I mean, Yeah, I think so at least. But yeah, there are precious few things that I do think are necessities, right? Are we ever actually handling this client? Could it be handling client? You can do %v in, is it like this? Is it, yeah, it's this, right? Copies lock by whatever, man. Let's do this. Yeah, I mean, this is what I agree about, right? Odin and Zig are basically the level I want it to be at. They're not going crazy. They're just saying, we're doing these things. That's it. We're not going to do too much. We're just going to do these things, and that's it. Let's log when we handle a client, because I don't know if we're ever actually doing this. It seems to me like maybe we are literally never accepting a client, which would be weird. Which would be weird as fuck. This is not the most helpful structure that I've ever seen. Can someone tell me what is the way? Hang on, can I do this? Is that a thing? Please tell me Odin has just stolen this exact syntax so I can write Odin and still have it be correct. Oh yeah, okay. So this is a connection. I'm still not getting that much from this output, if I'm being completely honest. Payload type 1. Why would it have a payload type in it all the time? That makes no sense to me, but okay. We are in fact we are ending up here. Now, are we ever ending up below that? Let's just say that. Writer, right? Let's say ping writer. %v, we don't need any fancy output here. We're just humble. We want to try ping writer, this one. Like this. No, we're never logging this, yeah? Am I crazy? I should have been smarter than this. I should have removed the other log, of course, but so we're never getting to that point. I have misunderstood this API completely. Oh no, we're getting the ping writer. Ah, it was here. I need new lines in my printfs. Let's add that one here. So we're getting the ping writer. I'm going to do the same for pong reader. And here we're sending a ping. I'm doing this with the ping writer, right? Does this actually work at all? I mean, you would expect this to actually show stuff, but let's say bytes written and like this, yeah? Let's panic if there's an error. And otherwise, we wrote this many bytes, right? Now we know that, yeah, certainly we're getting past that point. Printf, sure. Sounds good. But yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, of course, I agree with everything about this. You know, I prefer. I mean, there was a time when I preferred languages to be basically these sprawling things that I can spend so much time learning, right? And also I can extend them because we have meta programming and all of these things. I can spend days basically learning more about how to handle errors and so on. I kid you not. I spent, I think it was 4 days, basically only reading articles about Haskell error handling. And now you might think, well, Ricard, you're obviously a slow reader. No, this was just so many different ways of doing it, right? So many different strategies and all kinds of stuff. It's an incredibly deep topic, way too deep, right? I have read so much about Haskell error handling that it's crazy, right? And at some point you kind of get fed up, right? This should not be something that is that difficult, right? And that is kind of my view on things, obviously, nowadays. I will not use a language where it's constantly, hey guys, we should use this library that does this thing that it's doing algebraic effects and stuff because that's cool now or something, right? No, let's just not, because I don't want to spend that time that way. It's just not something I want to do, right? Here we can see that the Pong reader here is actually blocking. And if I was a smarter man, I would have checked. I was going to say I would have checked the documentation, but the documentation says fuck all about this. So it's not about me being smart, apparently. Let's comment that out and see what happens. Refused. Oh, hang on. Undefined Pong reader. Yeah. This is just not going to be a thing anymore. We're going to comment out a bunch of stuff. We're going to comment out everything almost. Ugh. This gets tiring sometimes, Go can be very pedantic sometimes. But it's nice that way, to be honest. Okay, we're getting data. Let's log this in. Okay, sending ping with this content, right? Bytes written. Yeah, this exactly this, right? And a lot of them aren't necessarily new features, but they are new ideas, or someone wrote an article recently about this idea. There was one very persistent thing, and to be fair, there was some reason to do this. So in Haskell, there was this idea, there was this article, scrap your boilerplate. Scrap your boilerplate turned into, in some ways, kind of a movement. I don't want to say a movement because that implies that people actually kind of follow this. You know what? We're not gonna get in. No, sorry, I let us into this. We're not gonna go further. Whatever. My point is, someone would usually, I would have, for example, a prospective interview with a client of our company, for example, someone who might want to become a client or something. I talk to their technical people and something, and one of them mentions this idea, and you can kind of tell they never used it, or they've never used it and have it actually work. And they're not very used to really industrial Haskell programming at all. They don't quite actually 100% know how to do it really. It's more like they're kind of fumbling around in the dark mostly. And that's why they're talking to us, maybe. This is the impression that I get from a lot of these enthusiasts about weird ways of doing things in Haskell, right? And sometimes they are on your team, for example, there's maybe a new team member or whatever it might be, and so on. And it can get a bit much. And there are so many ways of doing stuff in Haskell. People aren't even aware. When people they have never used Haskell and so on, they have some image of what Haskell is. And I can tell you it's not that. It's not what they think. But there are certain aspects of what they think that are true in other ways that they don't know about, right? And that's because they think, oh, this is a space technology language and so on. The fact is, Haskell can be used in a fairly simple fashion, right? But a lot of people who don't use Haskell are very into talking about shit that doesn't make any difference whatsoever. It's category theory and, you know, oh, this is based on math. Fuck you. Haskell is not particularly mathy, to be honest, in practice. You use bags of pointers that are basically global state in a much nicer way. You modify these pointers. Some of these pointers are actually transactional values, which means you have transactional semantics on these values, which means you can modify them from different threads and still be thread safe and so on. And this is space technology, but it's engineering, right? The actual runtime is very, very well engineered. That has nothing to do with math. None of those things I talked about have anything to do with math. It's literally just better imperative programming, right? And I don't know, people don't know that. Like, they don't know that that's a thing. Haskell has better support for pointers in many ways than most languages, right? Again, transactional semantics on pointers and so on. It's amazing in so many ways. But then you have these people who somehow find themselves in industrial Haskell programming and want to make it about all of these category theory things and so on. And that is very frustrating to have to deal with, to be honest. I use C++ and actually like the language, but it's annoying when someone says they want to create a better C++, then the language slowly morphs into a C++ clone. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing this obviously with, what's his name? Herb. Subber? Hang on. Fred. What's it? Herb Sutter. We're seeing this, of course, with his CPP2. Is it this one? And I'll be honest, I'm interested. I'm interested in CPP2 from the perspective of, you know, can you actually do this? Because a lot of his ideas are good. And I think he has the right idea about some stuff. Let me see if I can find this, right? There's this thing that he did mention that I'm actually very interested in. Holy shit, though. Herb Sutter, CPP2. Let's just search only for this, right? Because I'm sure... Okay, CPP front is really the thing that we should be searching for, perhaps. So there's this thing here that I think he has the right idea. And I'm not saying that because I think his example is good, but it's the only way C++ will ever get this. Let's see if I can find this. Okay, I can't find it now, but he has this idea, Herb Sutter, that CPP2 is, you know, basically syntax on top of C++, right? Basically, it has to take the TypeScript version, right? It has to have the TypeScript strategy of seamless interop with C++, right? And it's really, when you have CPP2, you actually, C++ is you can actually just drop in C++ code, right? And of course, this comes with certain trade-offs, right? You basically have to have C++ semantics to some degree, right? But I think this is the only way you can actually move forward in C++, right? It's too old, it's too large, it's too ingrained in everyone's, you know, psyche at this point, right? And if you're using C++ now, there's a good chance that you just like it, I guess, right? And so on. And he actually wants to move forward, right? And I think he has the right idea. It has to be gradual, It has to be, hey, you can really just kind of put this on top of C++, you know? And I think that's the right idea, to be honest. But yes, you're right that if you inherit everything from C++, of course, you're going to have just a massive language, right? That's true. Because C++ is just massive. All of the semantics and everything, yeah, of course. But I do think you can get somewhere. And I think he's right about this. The only way to do it is gradual, right? I think he had this post, Herb Sutter, TypeScript, Dart. Because there's a comparison here, right? A TypeScript for C++, right? This is the one. So in this talk, he basically outlines that there's the Dart strategy, which is introduce a completely different language, right? And of course, kind of what he's saying is Dart didn't really do very well. People did not, you know, take to Dart a lot, right? But then there's the TypeScript strategy of saying, we like the thing that we are replacing. We're going to just sort of gradually replace it with something that is slightly better, right? I happen to think TypeScript is a lot better than JavaScript, but whatever, you know. That's the thing he's saying. And I think he's right for C++. I think Odin would be better, of course. Just switch to Odin, everyone. Like, but, you know, I think he's right about this in the end, right? You kind of have to do this that way. If you're going to replace C++, right? With everything else, you know, we can have nice things. In fact. Let's see here if we can actually get some hex output. And indeed we can. Here it would be interesting. Actually, let's 02x. We might also do hash here. That didn't do anything, of course. So we have 89. Right, let's look at the protocol and see, or the RFC rather. Let's see what the frames are telling us. So 8, this is the final frame, right? Because the 8-bit is actually set here, right? 89 was our first byte. That means this was 9 here. The opcode is 9. That should be we should see that ping is that, right? Yeah, 9, right? So this is making sense now. We're receiving 8 and 9, right? 8 is actually here. Hang on, I have to let a cat out of the room. Hang on, I think Bjorn is in a hard position because he clearly would like to deprecate features, but at the same time, that would anger a large part of the group. Yeah, absolutely. I think he has said basically there are certain things you just shouldn't use anymore in C++, right? Specifically, I don't know if he's mentioned any stuff, but he clearly feels like there's also that quote inside of C++, there is a smaller, simpler language or something like this, I think was Strostrup. Within C++, there is a much smaller and cleaner language struggling to get out. And I think that's it's a telling thing, right? He obviously feels like C++ is way too large. And he would like for it to just be the bits that he actually wants in there, which I'm not sure we know exactly, but yeah. Luna, you want to go out? I didn't, Luna. No? Okay. But yeah, it can't be easy steering C++, right? It's a difficult thing probably to be honest. So we have these 7 bits for the payload length, which we would assume then, oh hang on, we have the mask. Can we figure out what value that would be? I guess we should start parsing this in some ways, right? We have 89, and we know that 9 here represents ping. The 8 represents that it's the final frame, right? Because it's the only frame. And then we have 12 here, which is 7 bits. Oh no, the mask plus 7 bits. That means the mask is not set, because that quartet starts here, or that nibble, I should say, starts there, right? Yeah, it does. So that nibble is there, and then we have the next 4, which actually are, yeah, this basically makes up the payload length. So we know that this mask is not set based on this pattern here, right? Because this implies that only the lowest is set here, right? So this one is set, and then we have the value 2 here, which means this one is set. So if I was better at this, I would probably calculate now, okay, this payload length has to be this or that, but I can't. So we're gonna parse this anyway, so it's fine. Let's actually kind of sit down and maybe do that, right? So let's do this piece by piece. We are gonna read 4 bits first. We're gonna read just 1 byte and split it up. Let's see here. We're gonna log this, and then we're gonna basically say, yeah, let's do this here, right? We don't need to make a function for this yet, to be honest. Receive first byte. Yeah, exactly. Hello. Oh, what is this? Copilot. What a guy, huh? No, actually, what a technology, huh? We shouldn't put genders on things without reason, guys. And then we have mask here. If not fin, no, we don't need that at all, to be honest. We have the opcode here. And here we could translate this, but we'll leave that for some other. And here we have the second byte, right? And the mask is actually, indeed, it's this. And then we have the payload length, which is exactly this, right? But here we have basically an if. Yeah, well, I'm a little bit too used to function at this point, to be honest. It's always been function. I can't, I mean, I started with C++ in around 2001. At this point, I've been talking about functions for way too long. I do try in the videos, for example, to say procedure, so that people are, you know, aware that it's procedure. But, you know, half of the time at least, I find myself just saying function, because, you know, they are not mathematical functions, but mathematical functions are basically meaningless in this context. So it's like, whatever, man. They're just functions at the end of the day. But they are, of course, procedures. But yeah, it's very hard to shake these kinds of things, to be honest. Here we have this payload length. If the payload length is 126, sure. Sure. Not in love with that syntax though. And here we of course want to do U16. That should be fine, all right? Yeah. should actually be a U64. Master ever not used. Not super concerned about that. Oh yeah, I know where it comes from. It's mostly that, you know, I don't come from from the same place, right? So I was never into Pascal. I had never had any exposure to Pascal, right? So for a long time I didn't know Pascal ever existed. Even it wasn't something that came up, you know. So I was blissfully unaware that basically almost any language existed. I mean, in 2001 when I started learning C++, I briefly was I was introduced to C because basically the C++ that I learned was effectively just C, to be completely honest. Mostly functions, procedures, mostly functions, and most of the strategies that I was using were basically just C strategies for doing stuff. And I suspect this was mostly because I didn't read my entire C++ book that I had. I had this book by Steven Prata. C++ Primer, I think it's called. Primer Plus. Though it was blue. I'm pretty sure. Not shopping, fuck off with that. Let's see. Yeah, there was this. This was the book I had, right? And I didn't read the entire thing, to be honest, because I'm not. I really like to just get going, and I've always been like this, to be honest. So I didn't read the whole thing. I learned a few things and sort of just started, and I feel like most of it was just C because the IRC channel that I hung out in, C++.se, was full of game developers, right? And, you know, people who primarily wrote basically C-style C++. At least I would say a lot of them did, right? So I basically was introduced to two languages, and those were the only ones I cared about at all, right? And at the same time, Java was kind of coming up, right? But it was, I don't know, people don't know this, I feel like, nowadays, but whenever someone made a Java application, it sucked ass. Like, it was awful. So there were, for example, torrent clients that were made in Java, presumably because it was the only thing someone knew, and they ran so badly. I can't even explain how garbage the software was. Right? Generally speaking, I would say software was better and faster back in the day. But Java was the first language that was like, how badly can we make this program run? Right? And it was so bad, I can't even explain how shit this was. Nowadays, people are like, oh, Java is so fast and so on. I don't know, probably it's better now, of course. It ought to be. I mean, certainly nowadays they do lots and lots of optimization just to make it work. But yeah, whenever you ran a Java application, back in the day, it was just death and slowness. Awful stuff. That was my first impression of Java, actually. Running applications that were obviously written in Java because they also had a certain look to them, right? And they were so bad. It was just an awful experience. I remember thinking, what is this garbage language that people are using? This is unusable software. Like, why would you do this to me? And of course, I mean, I was a little bit dramatic, of course, but, yeah, I mean, absolutely at the time, you absolutely needed something much closer to, the hardware and so on at the time. because, and you know, nowadays you can kind of get away with it, to be honest, right? I don't think you should, because I mean apps are fucking garbage nowadays as well. But Java was the first language that was doing that thing where people are like, no, this is good enough. Fuck you, it's not. I mean, it's just, yeah, very bad. Terrible, terrible software. Extended payload length. Sure, this is all fine. The fuck is this area about? Is it just the payload length? Probably, right? They taught a bunch of classes in Java, even though everyone clearly hated it. Well, that sounds like university to me. Right? This is 100% the modus operandi, if you will. Let's do. Let's have an I here. I feel like. So the masking key, how many bits was this? A bunch. I would rather program in assembly than Java. Yeah, it depends on the problem, to be honest. There are certain things, I mean, I'm not an assembly expert. I can read some assembly when I have to, but I mean, writing actual programs in it would be a stretch for me. But I can't see what I would be using Java for, if I'm being honest. I have much better server languages if I want to use something higher level, if I'm being honest. They're much more performant and stable for higher user counts and so on, right? If I want a server with tens of thousands of users, I will just use Erlang. Unless we need raw speed for each connection, for example. And then I would probably use something like Odin instead. Most performant programs are based in reality, which means they know what hardware they operate on. Can function in best possible way in world. In a world you don't know anything about. Yeah, this is true, right? I mean, this is just in some ways we are kind of restating Mike Acton from CPPCon, right? Data-oriented design in C++. This talk is in some ways exactly about this. You have to know what you're running on, because those are the things that actually matter for being fast, right? Great talk, by the way. We will copy the link and paste it in the chat for whoever might be interested. I watched this talk once a half year, maybe 2 times a year, maybe more. It's just an inspiring talk, to be honest. But yeah, let's see here. Ooh, So here we have the mask. If we have set the mask, we want to, and here it's saying obviously 4 bytes, right? Is that what we're getting here? Because we want to know, of course. Masking key 0 or 4 bytes, absolutely, so seems great. And then we want to read payload data. Payload data is extension data with application data. And here we will actually effectively ignore this, right? We only really have application data because we don't have any extensions. Extensions can fuck off, like we said, right? So now, in theory, we could actually do all of this. Let's see here. What are we doing here? This is not actually the case at all. Mismatch types in binary expression. Payload length is U64. This is, yeah. Yeah. It's by J, I plus J int. Okay, let's just say this. Recently watched the video how I program C because of your recommendation. Honestly, it was super enjoyable. Yeah, it's a fantastic, you know, because it's not only about like, oh, there's a very tempting thing you can do when you watch stuff like this, to be like, if he is failing to convince me to do this thing, that must mean he's wrong or something, right? But what I think is so nice about that video is you watch it, right? And you might not start just using C, right? I didn't when I saw that, you know, that video. But what you do get is an extreme appreciation for why Eskil thinks these things, right? And the points he's making, how they make sense from his perspective, right? And you kind of get a sense of, oh, I understand, and I will look for those values. I will look for that reality myself, right? What I got out of it was exactly this feeling of, I want this, right? But I want it, and back when I saw this first, I was getting into Zig, right? And so I said, I'm gonna build my mountain, right? And this became kind of a thing where, yeah, I think in some ways that started me on this whole trip down all of these, you know, languages, trying to actually build the mountain, right? Building all of these different things because I want to do so many different things, but I want to do stuff from the ground up because I want my mountain. I want the code to be something I understand everywhere all the time, right? And this is incredibly challenging, right? It takes time. Eskil has spent many years, right? He spent many years doing this, right? But this is the goal, right? The goal is to get there, and we just have to spend the years. We have to spend the time. We have to learn new things and, you know, assimilate more knowledge and so on, right? This is the goal in the end. And so yeah, I'm firmly on this path, basically. Let's see here, 8254. I'll be honest, fucking no idea. Oh yeah, this is the value. 8254889997. My memory is not good enough. As soon as we switch over here, 82548899. This is actually a very good, you know, having a cadence to it. So now we're basically parsing this message, right? We're saying basically, okay, this is the final frame. True. Opcode 9, which is ping. We are not using a mask. The payload length is this. And here's the actual payload. This is the random number that we are sending from Go, right? So now we have something, right? We're starting to pull out information from frames, right? This, regrettably, of course, is just one of the frames, right? But we will get there. Of course, this stream has been a little bit more chill, a little bit more chatter, which I do appreciate, though. This is kind of why I want to do the streams, because it gives me a much better opportunity to sort of talk to everyone, obviously. Exactly, I enjoy programming video games, and I prefer using game frameworks and making my own tools rather than rely on a game engine. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I feel like we are all very much on the same page when it comes to all of this, right? I think that's why we're here, right? Certainly, this is why. I mean, yeah, I made a video is precisely about this feeling, like we want to make stuff, right? We want to make stuff from the ground up so we understand them. We want to make stuff because it's fun, make them to learn, and all of that, right? And this is what I'm trying to do on the channel, like build this, not only build stuff on the channel, but build up a community that wants to build stuff, right? The absolute win here would be if people just sort of send, you know, or they say on the Discord, for example, because I have a Discord, right? If they say on the Discord, hey, I made this thing, you know, and it could be anything. The fact that they're sending it and they're proud of it, you know, they want to show it and so on. This is the goal in some ways, right? For people to say like, hey, I learned about this thing last week, you know, we're doing it. We're learning stuff. We're getting there, you know. So yeah, that's the kind of what I want in the long run. Full disclosure, right now I'm probably gonna say, you know, hey, we've parsed this thing. We parsed the frame, so I kind of feel like we're in some ways done with what we wanted to do on the stream. I'm happy to, honestly, to just kind of hang out though, certainly. We could package this up in a function, of course. That wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm working right now on my own game written in Odin with Vulkan. That is hard in mind. I can't use any engine on the market because my game will have to process a lot of data each frame. This is a good reason. You had me at my own game written in Odin. I mean, honestly, to me, I don't think people need to excuse writing their own thing. To be honest, like this whole, oh, it has to process a lot of data. You know, someone can always just say, well, you could have done that with dots in Unity, right? Someone will always find a way to tell you how, well, you could have done this in Unreal. You know, you could have done this with the source engine or whatever. So to me, you know, like I said, you had me at, you're working on your own game in Odin. That's it. To be honest, right? You shouldn't need an excuse to make your own engine, right? Especially if it's your first engine. Why not? Right? Because, yeah, I think I want to live in a world where you don't have to make any excuses for making your own thing at all, right? It never comes up. No one ever asks you, why didn't you just use Unreal or whatever, or Godot, for example. But yeah, I guess we're quite a ways from that, and it's only getting worse. I saw that my previous game studio that I worked at, Creative Assembly, they're basically doing only Unreal games now, I think. It's the only thing they're hiring for, as far as I could see. And this kind of depresses me a lot, to be honest. Because the Creative Assembly, for those who might not know, they produce strategy games, right? They produce the Total War series, and so on. And they have always had their own engines, basically, as far as I know. And it's a little bit sad, like a company basically saying, no, it's not worth it anymore. We're just gonna try to hire people who know Unreal or something. I don't know. Some of these engines are really good at what they do, you know, these custom engines and so on. And yeah, I mean, there must be some reason they did it, of course. But I think it's sad. I definitely think it's a sad thing. Unreal is completely understandable if you're making a game requiring cutting-edge graphics, but most games don't require this. I mean, I'll be honest, Total War as a series has not been cutting-edge graphics, ever, in my experience. So the fans don't expect this, right? The fans don't expect cutting-edge graphics. They expect high unit numbers and full simulation. So things like an arrow, for example, should be able to strike a soldier, an individual soldier, out of hundreds or thousands. That's what the fans are expecting, because that's the kind of game it is, right? And yeah, I don't know that the Unreal switch makes too much sense there. I'm not sure. I've never used Unreal, of course. I mean, what the fuck do I know about this, right? But I'm not sure, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, the X games. My favorite is X3. X3, I guess it's Albion Prelude is the one that was the kind of latest that I felt like, well, this is very good still. There was also, what was it called? Terran Conflict? Maybe you know. X3 Terran Conflict, something like this, maybe. The X3 games I like a lot. I wouldn't say that the engines are particularly like, oh wow, this feels amazing in some ways. But yeah, I've never played X4, so I don't know. Have I played X4? Which one is X3 Albion Prelude? I think this is the latest one I've played. Let's see. Yeah, Terran Conflict, that was the one. Okay, that was... Right, okay. Stuff is making sense. This game is amazing. I mean, the game is amazing. The engine, sure, it's fine. I've never felt like, wow, this is so smooth and amazing in some ways. But, you know, it's really, really good. Oh, I must have played Farnham's Legacy, though. But that's a DLC, so I suppose it's not a separate game. But yeah, so Albion Prelude with Farnham's Legacy. I'm pretty sure. Because it wasn't that long ago that I played it. It's a workable engine. X3 never to me, I don't think I had any issues with it, right? What I'm really playing X3 for is building massive trading empires, an industry. I love that shit. It's amazing, right? You build the factories to produce some stuff. You buy these massive haulers that you attach jump drives to, and you just have them running on autopilot, right? You build the industrial empire. This is good shit. I probably just did it because there are a lot of Unreal devs, so it's easy to find and hire people. Absolutely, yeah. Just to be clear, I'm talking about them now. I left Creative Assembly in 2018, right? So, you know, this may have started happening earlier, I don't know, but I did see on their job postings now that, yeah, they aren't hiring for this. To be 100%, you know, clear also, I worked on backend stuff at Creative Assembly. So there was a game no one has heard of, Total War Arena. This game, which never basically came out. Oh, it's on the wiki. That's fun. This was a 10 versus 10 multiplayer game, and I worked on the back end for this in Erlang, in fact. It was fun. If anyone has the opportunity, I would definitely recommend working, by the way, at Creative Assembly. It's a good company. Most people cannot say that about the game industry, or a lot of people can't say that about the game industry, but I would say Creative Assembly is a good company to work at. They have good policies. They have a policy against crunch, and so on. And I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But certainly, I never experienced any crunch, and we certainly had points of, we need to have this done, and so on and so forth, right? Unfortunately, the reality of the games industry is that yes, you can work on a game, and it will never be released. It will stay in closed alpha, and then it will be shut down, and so on. Likewise, I worked at Crytek, again, games company, and worked on this game, Arena of Fate, which also was not released. And that's the reality of stuff, basically. But yeah. X-Tech 5. That's a good name. X-Tech. It's very anonymous. No one knows what it is. It's just X-Tech, It's good. Sounds like X-Tech 5 sounds like an item in the X games. Right? You will have an X-Tech Mark V, and it's a radar component or something. Evaluate engines on the market from time to time, but all of them have too much overhead for the game to work very well on lower hardware. Yeah, I mean, that's everyone with a custom engine that is actually purpose built for the game that they're making, right? Because it is so much more efficient to do one specific thing instead of doing everything, right? And so on. A lot of people think Unreal is obviously more optimized or whatever, but the truth is, if your engine is doing everything, it simply cannot do one thing very well, right? I don't think people really... The reason Unreal is growing is simply like what Evan said, right? They did it because there are a lot of Unreal devs, so it's easier to find and hire people for your team, right? And they are looking for effectively people who know, for example, netcode, right? One of the positions they were hiring for, last I checked, was network programmer, but specifically within the context of Unreal, right? So they are now basically pigeonholing themselves into this Unreal hole, right? And yeah, I think the results are going to be interesting, to be honest. Yeah, if you don't need something, why have the code for it? That is the exact correct way of doing things, I think. I mean, if your game doesn't need a thing, why on earth would that thing be in the engine? It makes no sense whatsoever, right? And I think, I don't know, I'm not buying the thing that people say, well, games are so much more complicated now. No, I think games are following the same trend as every other programming endeavor, right? All of the other programming industries are following the same trend. Things are getting more complicated because people are making them more complicated. It is entirely possible to simply have something that is purpose-built and is simple because it is purpose-built, right? But no, absolutely not. I mean, and some of these companies, they have their own engines, but they are so general that they can make almost any game with them or whatever. They can make any third-person game within that engine. And at that point, you've ended up in the same box, right? Same box as Unreal. Because if you can make any game with your engine, at that point, yeah, it's just a general engine. I mean, it's just going to be a massive, complicated thing, right? Even worse if it's like, oh, we can make an FPS, we can make a strategy game, we can make a third-person game, adventure game, maybe some puzzle games and so on. I mean, one of the things that really was kind of shit on this, right, Arena of Fate, was basically the engine guys. They had to take the CryEngine, right, which was made for FPS games, right, and then basically make that into a MOBA, right? So basically a Dota clone. Actually a League of Legends clone, basically, at the time. But of course, a League of Legends is really just a watered down Dota. But basically they had to make CryEngine, which was not built for this purpose, a MOBA engine, right? By modifying it. I don't think this is the right way to go about things, to be honest. It's just kind of awkward. But yeah, I mean, this is, to be completely clear, Crytek was a terrible company. As much as I said before that Creative Assembly is a great company and you should definitely work for them if you get the chance, you know, provided the pay is good. Absolutely never work for anything that has anything to do with Crytek. That's my recommendation. Yeah. And if you don't know why, you can really just search for things like studios not getting paid and so on, if you need to know more about that. And also, I mean, it's kind of obvious Crytek is just not doing very well, right? I'm surprised they're still alive. I have never experienced incompetence like the management at Crytek. It's yeah. Cryptocurrencies and other interesting Crycash. Let's see. What does the internet say about Crycash? Decentralized gaming ecosystem. Yeah, that's Crytek for you. A cryptocurrency based on fragging people and so on. What a fucking joke. What a joke of a company. Wow. I honestly, I can't even with this shit. What an absolute dog shit company, honestly. Like, they have so many bad ideas. I can't even explain how much I dislike how they ran this company. This is so stupid. Anyway, let's not dwell on stupid companies too much. Let's see here if we can parse WebSocket frame. It's a procedure. Take some data, slice of bytes. I know I said we wouldn't go forward with this, but now I need to get the taste of Crytek out of my mouth, you know, a little bit. We're gonna parse some data and we're gonna return a WebSocket. So WebSocket. Should I do this? Or should I do this? You know? Or this? We're gonna do this. Frame. Error is a WebSocket parse error. I'm not gonna finish this code, but like I said, I need to get my mind off of stupid shit at the moment. So here we kind of want to basically take this code, put it in here. Obviously it's not going to work like this. That's fine for us right now. A WebSocket frame is actually going to be a union, I think, because we want a ping frame, pong frame. For now we're going to do a ping frame only. And a ping frame is going to be a struct. And you'll note here that this means we can basically leave out the opcode, right? The opcode is what decides what we decode, right? We know that we have a ping frame, so we're going to construct one. And this really, all that means in the end is that we have essentially a payload in this, right? So this opcode, we're going to basically have a switch here, right, on the opcode. And exactly what Copilot is saying here is basically what we're going to do, right? Something like this. I mean, not exactly this, of course. But Copilot showed sort of yeah, this is generally speaking what I'm thinking, right? So we have this union, we have a ping frame, we're gonna have a text frame, a data, a binary data frame, and so on. By SQL suggestion, I've started to build my own software stack, starting from GLTF multi-platform importer for Odin. The one in vendor isn't multi-platform. I just hope audio will be simpler. Why idiot? I'm curious. Are you saying you don't feel smart enough to do the audio, or you thought the first thing was difficult, and so you just hope that you don't have to strain yourself so much with the next thing? But you're learning a lot, right? In the end, I mean, all of this is just practice, right? I think this is really the value of all of this stuff, right? I don't think, because a lot of people, I feel like they don't appreciate how much you can actually learn from just doing and doing and doing and doing, right? This is why we're here in the end. I think it's, working on stuff like this, right? What am I going to accomplish after doing this tonight, right? Well, functionally speaking, not a lot, right? What can I do tomorrow that I couldn't do yesterday? Nothing. Because the truth is, I've always been able to use a library for this, right? For as long as I've known about WebSockets, there's been a library that I could use, right? But the purpose of doing all of these things now, right, is so that I can build these things, I can understand them completely, I can understand exactly what goes on in the background, right? And that's where we want to be in the end. The long-term value of learning all of these things, to me, is immense. I mean, this is why, in many ways, like, I am now basically, since I am running my own company and everything, I'm basically now deciding for myself what I want to do, right? Building all of these things, understanding them, learning more, and so on. This is exactly what I want to be doing with my time, right? I'm going to have to spend time doing contracting work for companies and so on, in order to, of course, like, get money in and all of those things, right? But long term, this is exactly what I want to be doing, layer by layer, adding more and more, right? So I can build exactly what I want in the end. And I think that's the long-term value, right? Some things are hard, some things are difficult, some things are just tedious, right? But no matter what, really, in the end, I think I'm going to be much, much happier regardless, right? This is just data. I don't understand always when OLS thinks I should have a new line or not. It doesn't always make a lot of sense to me when it feels like a invalid opcode. Let's do that. That's a good error to have. Invalid opcode. Opcode is a byte value. That's fine, I guess. cannot assign web blah, and that's because of course this is not up here. Missing return statement, sure. At this point we shouldn't have any error. Here we actually want to just return. I don't know why I bothered with this. Here we want basically an empty WebSocket frame for basically. That's fine. Here we could just have a return, to be honest. Let's just do that. We're actually, unfortunately, we're gonna need that regardless. You know, I can never get used to this. This is also something I have to work on. Let's do some underscores here. And it's very annoying, by the way. I can't get used to this. I mean, it's a small thing, but I'm trying to write code that is, you know, seems in some ways idiomatic and so on. And I just can't, you know, every time, right? I think in terms of Haskell types. Or many languages. I mean, many languages have this kind of Pascal case, right? And I just can't get used to this Ada case, right? Because I don't think in that way. Whenever I make a type, I just make the Pascal case one, and it's hard to shake, to be honest. So we're gonna return the frame there, and here we could actually say frame parse error, parse WebSocket frame like this. If frame parse error, yeah, sure. Let's just do X. It doesn't matter really. We're just demoing or whatever. We're playing around with some code, right? Here we can switch on the frame, and of course here we're gonna have case ping frame. Like this, and here we can do, I mean, really we can only really do the payload, to be honest. We could just do, yeah, ping frame payload. Let's just do this. This is the only actual useful information that we have at this point, right? And here we shouldn't actually need a separate case, to be honest, right? Again, wow. Let's see here. Do I have to do this though? No. F in frame, of course. What am I doing? No one is telling me. What is this, guys? No one's telling me. This should be fine. Ping frame payload 119.177.057. 119.177.057. Not gonna lie, I'm gonna have to copy this value of 119.177.05. Yeah, I don't want there to be like a small difference, right? Because that's the worst. Having a big difference, fine. Something is just clearly very wrong. Having a small difference, suspicious. That's where the real bullshit is. When you have a small difference from something and you're like, no, hang on. We don't want to be one off, right? We want to be 1,000 off or something, but not one off. Oh, hang on. Well, to be clear, this is a test program. We would never send this, right? This is all going, first of all, in a... So, just to be clear, this basically from here on is going in a function that basically connects a WebSocket, right? And so on. And yeah, most of this is just testing code. Right now we're just sort of exploring the whole thing, right? That's why we've been doing the parsing inline and all of these things, right? So these format things wouldn't really exist otherwise, right? But also I would not leave log stuff in, to be honest. I was doing some performance checks and so on some LZ4 decompression and so on. And even with a nil logger, right? A nil logger is a logger that does nothing, right? Even with a nil logger, it added seconds to doing stuff. Whereas the normal time for execution was something like 27 milliseconds. So log is only for debugging. Or an extremely slow server, maybe. But there's a good chance I would just try to write my own thing, maybe. Because log there's probably something wrong in there, I would bet. Unless LLVM 17 has somehow optimized something away, maybe. Possibly, right? I haven't checked with LLVM 17, but with LLVM 14, it was basically, any call to log, even if it's a nil logger, literally a function that does nothing, right? Just added seconds to something that takes milliseconds, right? So it's, not for production usage whatsoever, unfortunately, right? And of course, logging solutions in many other languages will similarly be, they add a lot. But those languages have the benefit of just being like, oh yeah, we know it's slow. They don't give a shit. The logging is adding barely nothing because they're already slow, and half of the time, at least they claim, they're just waiting for the database, or they're waiting for an API call to show up and so on. So for them it doesn't matter, right? But in Odin, of course, if the logger is slow, you just don't log. Right? It's like, no, we only use this when we're debugging something, period. We literally do not even have the calls, right? And we need something that basically takes away the calls for all production builds, period, right? That's the only solution, basically. I suppose asserts could be the solution, really, right? Just having good asserts in many, many, many different places. But normally, yes, for all actual debug purposes, I use log debugf. It's my preferred thing, because then you can also add context, right? So, for example, what I really like here, for example, is the ident field, right? So here, adding something special depending on what you're doing is, really good. Yeah. Well, this needs to be built in, the whole when Odin debug, right? In the end, it needs to be built into the entire mechanism for it to be useful in that way, right? In my opinion. People might not agree, but basically, and of course you can make a definition. So I suppose we could do when Odin debug, log, etc. And then else or whatever, and then have it do nothing, I suppose. Something. I'm not sure how it's built right now, but I know it affected stuff way more than it should. And yeah, got a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth from that one, to be honest. Now I literally only use it for debugging purposes now. Because the thing is, when you're building backend systems, you actually want logging. you want essentially tracing logging in some sense, right? Where you can trace a request in multiple different systems, right? Which is exactly what the ident field is good for, right? So if we look at the create console logger, right? This ident field here is perfect for user ID, request ID, user ID / request ID, right? All kinds of neat things you can do here, right? Now you know exactly what's going on across several systems and so on. But this doesn't really, work if the shit is just too slow in practice and so on, right? Even in release builds, right? When it adds a shit ton of time, even there, like no, at that point we just need a better solution. Like something needs to you would just build your own probably or something like this, right? Because it's just not good enough. But yeah, hang on, that's a entirely later story in the end, to be honest. I'm not saying, by the way, oh, what a terrible job they did with these fuckers or whatever. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm saying just be careful with the log system because it's not that 100% great. Hello, Hikaru. What is his name? That's a very interesting name. How would you pronounce this last name? I'm fascinated by this last name. Hikaru. Yeah, I don't want to even attempt it because it's very interesting. I say this is someone with a name that most people cannot pronounce, by the way. It's very hard for non-Swedish people to pronounce my name. They think that they can pronounce it, but they cannot. Ah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's a good name, right? It's a strong, good name. Now you might think, okay, what's a bad, weak name? But yeah, most names are pretty cool once you get down to business, to be honest. That's a good story, Icarus. Actually, it reminds me of the Swedish pronunciation of Icarus, which is yeah, that's a good approximation, Evan. Yeah, Andersson. That's the last name, right? So it's Andersson, but because a lot of people think it's Andersson, right? But when you have an R and an S in Swedish, it actually becomes sjö, right? So Andersson. And my first name, similarly, has what's called a retroflex consonant in it, which is R and D, right? So Rickard. So at the end there, if you imagine I guess I'm not well versed here in Indian linguistics, but if you imagine an Indian saying "d," right? So an Indian person, not a Native American. This is at the end of my first name, Rickard. And this is the part that people, generally speaking, cannot. I mean, it's not natural, right? It makes no sense to anyone except Swedish people. And yeah. So it's Rickard Andersson. But of course, I'm not like, oh, you can't say my name, what a piece of shit you are. It's more like, yeah, I'm used to just, because usually I get people say Ricard. In Bulgaria, it's more common for them to say, first of all, they call me Rick, usually, because they just want to shorten it, which is understandable. But also, if they do say my name, some people go with Ricardo, and normally it's Ricard, because they don't have this retroflex consonant here, right? So in Bulgaria it becomes Ricard, because you just pronounce all of the letters instead, right? Nothing magical is happening. But of course Swedish is not like that. So yeah, Rickard Andersson. D. You put your tongue up in your at the roof of your mouth a little bit. D. D. It's a much stranger name than it seems. Of course, in Sweden, it's one of the most common names, Rickard. And Andersson is the most common last name. So I'm basically, in some ways, John Smith, you could say, in Sweden. Not exactly John Smith, right? But something like a David Smith or whatever, right? Because Andersson is such a common last name. It means son of Anders. And so on. And our names in Sweden used to be this way, where you were named after someone, and so on. The only country that actually still does this up in the Nordics or whatever is Iceland. It is kind of strange, yeah. Certainly most languages don't have this kind of up and down thing and so on. And in Swedish, of course, it matters. One good example of changing meaning with pitch is anden means the spirit, and anden means the duck, and so on. And yeah, it's a fairly unique thing. And also just the variable kind of pitch in general. Serbian also has at least something very similar. I'm not entirely sure that it's exactly the same thing, but Serbian also has something like this. And you can tell when they speak, because Bulgarian, for example, is a lot more straightforward, right? It's just sort of, it doesn't go up and down so much. It's really, and certainly it will not switch a lot and so on in a word, right? But Serbian sounds a lot more up and down, basically, in terms of pitch and stress and so on. It's an interesting language as well, because they also have a productive case system, right? Where productive means it's still productive in linguistics means basically it still actually forms the language and how words are actually pronounced and so on. Because most languages will have case systems, but they're not productive. They are remnants of case systems, right? So one example of that would be whom in English is a remnant of a case system, right? For whom have you done this or whatever. But yeah, languages, interesting. I do love me some languages. Not only the programming kind. I am very much into languages. Or, well, I've always had a very easy time with languages, to be honest. Never studied a Slavic language, so a lot of the grammatical features are unusual to me. Yeah, they are definitely to me as well. Swedish is an exceedingly simple language grammatically. And coming to Bulgaria was, I started learning Bulgarian slightly before I came to Bulgaria, but their verb conjugations are quite the grammar trip. They have a large system in comparison to Swedish, and so on. And it took some getting used to, certainly. I'm not excellent at Bulgarian, but I have conversational Bulgarian, I would say. I mean, I've been here for quite some time now, so it would be strange if I didn't. But yeah, I would say learning Bulgarian is a kind of simple endeavor, but it's hard. Meaning the solution is simple. You just practice a lot in certain things and it will make sense and so on. But it's hard because there's still a lot to do, right? In the end. They have some things that I just genuinely, they don't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. They have these verb conjugations that are based entirely on if you've heard that something happened, but you didn't see it. You were not a witness to it. And that is a different conjugation than if you saw it happen. And on some level, this does exist in Swedish, but I've literally never thought about it. And it's not 100% the same, and so on. It is just kind of difficult to learn some of these things. Oh yeah. Swedish is not normal in some ways. Yes, absolutely. Well, it's also strange in the way that, you know, Swedish does not necessarily sound like it's written, which is kind of bad for people when they learn it. It can be very difficult to figure out how a certain sentence is supposed to sound, especially because you have stress in these sentences, right? And a lot of these variable pitches that we were talking about disappear entirely if the word is not stressed, and so on. So there's a lot to keep track of when it comes to actually sounding Swedish out, right? And listening to someone speaking Swedish is a little bit of a challenge as well, because, you know, there's a lot going on in the actual pronunciation of Swedish. Like I talked about before, these retroflex consonants and stuff. This is not very common. Some of these sounds, the way they're put together and so on, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to people, and so on. The closest thing you have to some of these is the word, for example, word, right? The R and D there, right? They make something like this, right? Like my name, Rickard, word, right? Murder, right? And this is also something, for example, in the Scottish accent, they don't really have this in the same way. This is why they, in some ways, say martar, but it's kind of they roll instead, and so on, right? But yeah, a lot of these retroflex consonants, all of these things, I do think that they're very difficult to put together for people. So actually speaking Swedish can be very difficult. But I think it's very easy to learn how to read Swedish still. And then we also have a lot of different weird accents that they just don't sound like every other Swedish. So it's a lot like kind of English in the UK, I suppose, right? Where it just becomes almost like a different way of even making sounds, which is even more strange. Yeah, the cutting at the end of this is one of those things where I think it can be super confusing to hear a Swedish person speak. Absolutely. And the sound that you're referring to, sju, also sounds different in different accents, right? If you're from Stockholm, you'll probably say sju. I can't even say that without laughing a little bit, but sju, where it's I say sju, sjuksköterska, and so on. And this doesn't necessarily sound the same always. Of course, you will know that that's what I'm saying, but you know, putting everything together can be a little bit difficult. I'm assuming, and so on. But yeah, I think actually, where have you come into contact with Swedish, by the way, Evan? It's a very strange language to learn. Like a rarity, if you will. Because now I'm very curious if it's just like you just had an interest, there was a band you liked, maybe a woman. What happened here? It's very common that there's a woman. There was a woman that actually led me to Bulgaria, I can tell you that. My wife, by the way, current wife. My only wife, in fact. But yeah, there was a woman in those happenings. I feel like there's a long story coming here. I'm hoping that you heard what I asked at least. Yeah, Skånska still confuses me as well. I don't know if you have ever met a bumfuck Idaho Skåning, but I can tell you that there are places in Skåne that basically it's not worth even attempting to talk to these people. I can't understand what they're saying. And I'm not saying that because I'm some kind of elitist, big town, whatever person. I'm from Östergötland, a very, very small town in Östergötland. It's like 45,000 people, 35 or something thousand people. It's not a big place. But you get out into the farmland in Skåne and I just can't understand them. Like, it's just impossible. I don't at all understand them. This is very cool. Like, you basically just sort of, oh yeah, Scandinavian language, that's where it's at. That's actually very cool. Very rare, though. I've met, I used to work in Swedish customer support in Bulgaria, and I actually met several people that studied Swedish, right? Because they were hired to do customer support in Swedish and so on. So I have met quite a few people who have studied Swedish for some reason. And so I'm used to this, right? But I still cannot get my head around, like, why Swedish? Or in your case, Scandinavian languages, right? It's an odd choice. But they are, I guess, interesting languages if you live outside of them a little bit, right? In some ways. Obviously I'm from Sweden, so to me it's all kind of boring and normal, right? I don't like, for example, media in Swedish necessarily, though there's some Swedish music that I really like a lot, right? But it's hard to take Swedish seriously for me sometimes, a little bit. I don't know, I can't explain why, right? Because people whose native language is English, they don't feel this way. But I guess that's the thing. Most of the media that I've consumed is just, well, it's English. Like, it's just Hollywood, basically. So to me, a serious movie about tough guys, right, or whatever, because I grew up with gangster movies, right? So at a very young age, for some reason, I watched Goodfellas. It's one of my favorite movies. Scarface, and so on. And I guess I grew up with these, right? Not so much Disney and stuff. And that's just sort of how that shaped me, I suppose, right? I could never take a movie seriously if it's about, these gangster people in Swedish. It would be so strange somehow, right? Because it's like, nah. Though there is one, Snabba Cash. Let's see if we can find this. It wasn't bad. It actually wasn't bad. Yeah, now I'm thinking, hang on, IMDb will have this, yeah? You read a book by a Swedish author and really enjoyed it, so I decided it would be interesting to it would be interesting to read the books in the native language. That's a very interesting reason. Yeah. Oh, hang on. Did we literally at the same moment think about this, about Snabba Cash? Or was it a different Jens Lapidus? Because I was thinking about movies in Swedish, right? And of course this is a book from the beginning by Jens Lapidus. And I was thinking about this movie, right? Because I was saying I can't take Swedish, tough guy seriously or whatever in movies and so on. But there was this movie that wasn't so bad. Easy money as well, Snabba Cash. This means quick cash, right? Quick money. This wasn't terrible, to be honest. And honestly, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I want to say Kinnaman, but I'll be honest, I don't know that I've heard his name be spoken that much. But yeah, Joel Kinnaman. I like him as an actor, to be honest. I think this movie was decent, to be honest. There's also one, Låt den rätte komma in. This is Let the Right One in English. This one. This movie was good. I don't, generally speaking, like Swedish movies so much, except they're often a lot more honest than Hollywood movies. Like, they have a certain... Nordic movies have a certain feeling to them that I like because it sort of resonates with me. That not everything is super fucking happy all the time, right? They're sometimes more content with just saying, yeah, shit's really sad and it's not, sometimes the atmosphere is just, yeah, stuff is bleak and sad and dark, Wilhelm Moberg, yeah. But yeah, Let the Right One In. This is a decent movie. I like this one. This one actually stuck with me. I've never heard of this. Den osannolika mördaren. The unlikely murder, sure. Stig Engström, mannen som påstår har blivit dåligt och verkligen kommit undan med. Is it about Palmemordet? Yeah, Palmemordet, yeah. For those who might not know, for future viewers of this VOD, for some reason, our Prime Minister was murdered in '86 by someone. No one knows who. Though a year ago or so, the police claimed that they knew who it was. I don't necessarily believe them, but yeah, they bungled this investigation something incredibly. It was not a good showing for the Swedish police. I am. This would be interesting to watch. I suppose, yeah. This is one of Sweden's main comedy actors, actually. And it's interesting, obviously here he's playing a very serious role. Very serious. Robert Gustafsson was in some of my absolute favorite comedy programs, notably Nile City. I can't even explain what this show is about, and you kind of, I don't know, it's not going to make sense to anyone watching it now who doesn't know Swedish or whatever, watching some kind of translation or something. It just doesn't make but it's just so hilarious, to be honest. Since you know Swedish, I think you might actually. The thing is, though, it's a little bit like, you know how some shows are about the time they were in, because of course this was made in '95, right? And I watched it a few years after that, basically, and it was still kind of, yeah, this makes sense still, right? But yeah, I mean, watch it and maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I think it's hilarious, and when I watch this show now, it just sort of makes me happy, to be honest. But yeah, it's probably a little bit dated. I'm not sure. If you can find it, of course, right? But you might know Johan Rheborg, if you know Swedish media. Also very popular actor for comedy shows and so on. He's made a lot of stuff. It is about a radio channel, yeah. And the characters that work in this radio station are interesting, right? The people who made this, they were basically doing kind of sketches, but this is not necessarily a sketch show. They do have recurring characters that are more, in some ways, fleshed out. It's a very short show, though. It's actually 6 episodes only, but it's this kind of small, concentrated, just hilarious blast of comedy to me, and to a lot of other people, of course, in Sweden. But I don't know that it would survive, of course, like translation and all these things. But yeah, this was an unexpected turn of events for this stream. To be honest, I did not expect that. But yeah. Anyway, I think we're gonna end on that note. A very obscure, to everyone outside of Sweden, TV show has been recommended. And if anyone is interested in this, Nile City. It's just a fantastic show, to be honest. But that's where we're gonna leave it. Next time we're probably gonna flesh out all of the frames for WebSockets. That will be tomorrow, probably. No. Don't worry about getting me off topic. I did that, on my own. I know exactly what I'm doing. I like the interaction, to be honest. This is kind of why the streams are fun, right? Because we get to talk. We get to talk about lots of stuff. One of the streams, we looked, for example, at memes that were related to game consoles that were released and so on. And this is sort of just we're just having fun, right, together. That's the whole point. We're also kind of doing stuff every now and then, but yeah. Anyway, next time we're gonna do more frames. We're gonna do presumably all of the frames, because there isn't that much parsing that needs to be done for most of these, right? And the payload data is going to be the interesting part of most of these, and so on. We're not going to implement any of the extensions to begin with, so that's fine. And yeah, so that means we have a continuation frame, we have text frames, we have binary frames. So of course, continuation here basically means we have to handle when multiple frames are going to be received. So probably we're going to have to make some kind of looping construct that takes multiple frames, puts them together, maybe stitches the payloads together or something like this, right? We'll see. That could be a higher level construct. Then we have text frames, binary frames, reserved, doesn't matter, connection close, ping we have, pong we need, and so on, right? And so that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow, probably. And yeah, that's kind of it. To be honest, we're on our way to having basically a complete WebSocket client, and that at that point we can basically put something together like a test suite that we can run to say like, hey, yeah, this makes sense, and so on. And yeah, I'm feeling good about this. I feel like we're going to put together something that makes perfect sense. We're also obviously going to put some of this in actual utility functions that we can use, to coordinate some of these things. But yeah, we have a plan, and I feel like we're going to be on our way to something that makes a lot of sense. When we're done with the WebSocket client, we can actually at that point implement a Discord bot with that. But that's maybe a couple of streams in the future. If people want to do that, I'm not entirely sure. That's kind of what I want to do. I want to have a Discord bot that we can have on my Discord server, written entirely in Odin. Some of the events that you receive from Discord actually are received via WebSocket, so that's why we need this. But also it's cool to have WebSockets, of course. But okay, that's it for today. Thanks, Evan, Pavel, and everyone who participated in the chat. It's been super nice having people here, talking a lot, and so on. This is why we do the streams, and so on. But yeah, have a nice day, and ciao.